Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira. For the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events that have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. China calls for restraint as North Korea unleashes its most provocative act so far, fires missile that flies over Japan and lands in waters off the northern region of Hokkaido. Trump asks Congress for $7.9 billion for Hurricane Harvey relief. The storm said to be the worst rainfall disaster in U.S. history. Analysts put the total predicted cost of Harvey at over $100 billion. After nearly 3 months of tense standoff, India and China agree to disengage troops in Doklam. External Affairs Minister confirms withdrawal of its soldiers. China says it will make appropriate changes in the region. Kenyan Supreme Court cites election irregularities, invalidates last month's presidential election result. Opposition calls for prosecution of Electoral Committee that declared Uhuru Kenyatta as the winner with 54% votes. Well, China has hit back at British Prime Minister Theresa May for her comments that Beijing needs to put more pressure on North Korea to stop missile tests. China hit back saying some relevant sides were only selectively carrying out the UN resolutions by pushing hard on sanctions yet neglecting to push for a return to talks. This is the latest in a line of strong reactions to North Korea's latest missile launch on Tuesday. US President Trump says that the launch signaled the regime's contempt for its neighbors and the UN, adding that all options were on the table. However, North Korea insists that the launch was a direct response to US-South Korean joint military drills.
What happened yesterday is absolutely unacceptable and irresponsible. No country should have missiles flying over them like those 130 million people in Japan. It's unacceptable. They have violated every single UN Security Council resolution that we've had. And so I think something serious has to happen.
The US and its allies continue to look for ways to contain North Korea's belligerence. This after the regime's latest launch of an intermediate-range ballistic missile over Japan. North Korean news agencies said that the launch was a prelude to more military options aimed at Guam, with more launches planned in the future. It added that the launch was to counter the ongoing US and South Korean military drills.
It is an undeniable fact that US is driving the station of Korean Peninsula towards extreme level of explosion by deploying huge strategic assets around the peninsula to conduct a series of nuclear war drills and maintaining nuclear threats and blackmail for over a half-century.
On Tuesday, United Nations Security Council met to discuss the latest launch, condemning it as outrageous. Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that the launch undermined regional security and stability.
The Security Council came together unanimously to support the increased sanctions resolution 2371, and I hope that all of my colleagues will come together with the same spirit of unity to respond today as unitedly and firmly as we did then.
While US President Donald Trump continues to warn Pyongyang that all options were on the table, Russia and China cited the joint US-South Korean military drills as the source of the latest tensions. Russia further warned that the use of force was a path to nowhere, a path to catastrophe.
Look, we appreciate the very strong support that President Trump is showing to Japan, and we appreciate the fact that he said every option is on the table.
The past has proved that exerting pressure and using sanction cannot fundamentally resolve the issue. Korean Peninsula issue is intricate, complex and long-standing. The only correct way to resolve it is via talks.
Pyongyang has conducted a flurry of missile tests recently, but this is the first time it has fired what is thought to be a ballistic weapon over Japan. As the missile soared over Hokkaido Island, Japanese authorities issued a safety warning, urging citizens to shelter in a study building or basement. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called the missile launch an unprecedented threat to his country. The launch comes just over 2 weeks after North Korea threatened to fire a series of missiles in the waters around the US Pacific territory of Guam. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, join me for a chat this week to talk about the North Korean situation is KP Nair, strategic analyst. Thank you for joining me on the program, Mr. Nair. You know, this latest missile launch over Japan, this is the first time that North Korea has actually launched a ballistic missile over Japan. How serious is the situation? Because the Japanese and the Americans have condemned what has happened and they're clearly not happy with what the North Koreans have been doing thus far. But is the situation only turning for the worse with each passing day?
What North Korea has done is certainly a provocation. But as in the case of Syria, it appears to me that the balance is shifting in favor of Russian diplomacy and in this instance Chinese diplomacy. Because you see, at the end of the day, US power has its limits. US has the option of either launching a preemptive strike, for which there is no support in the US. Congress is not in favor of it, because what is happening in North Korea as of now is not threatening United States in the home turf. Americans get into action only when there is a security threat at home, like September 11. So there's no stomach for a preemptive strike. And there is also the awareness that if North Korea gets out of control and launches a war, American casualties will be significant. You know, there are the American soldiers in the demilitarized zone and in South Korea, then losses in Seoul and periphery if there is some sort of a missile attack, God forbid, will be severe. So Putin's statement yesterday about needing to live with North Korean missiles is quite significant.
You know, talking about Putin, Putin has also said that there's no point in, in pressurizing North Korea. You have to sit and engage with them, talk to them, and that's probably what's going to lead to a solution. Do you believe that that is the right approach to deal with someone like Kim Jong-un?
Well, Putin is talking sense in a way, but talks have never yielded long-term results with the North Korean leadership. So it is my opinion that especially countries like India should take the initiative. There is need for a long-term strategic look at how to deal with North Korea. One possibility is, North Korea needs to be prevented from acquiring or, God forbid, using chemical weapons if they acquire. At the moment, the South Koreans have proposed a candidate, their candidate for Director General's position in the OPCW, Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons in The Hague. I think it is necessary that India should vote for this South Korean candidate, for example, because as putting a South Korean in place in an organization like OPCW, where they have a stake in doing this, and of course the rest of the world has a stake too, can make sure that things don't get beyond. Already they have a nuclear weapon, already they have very dangerous missiles. If chemical weapons also fall into their hands, don't know what the mad leadership in Pyongyang will do. So I think we need to look at the idea of a South Korean candidate getting the job of Director General in OPCW.
What options are left as far as Trump is concerned? Because the rhetoric has been extremely high from the American side. He said that, there's no turning back, there's chance of striking North Korea, and so much has been said. Is it an option of engaging with North Korea really for Trump?
You see, previous American presidents have also done the same, notably George W. Bush. Remember, the axis of evil.
Yes.
But ultimately, George W. Bush also had to send a special envoy to Pyongyang. There is, the difference now is that unlike Obama or even George W. Bush, President Trump may get carried away by his own rhetoric, which would be very dangerous.
Sure.
I hope sense will prevail in Washington, and President Trump would work very closely with South Korea and Japan, which are the two countries which have the greatest stake, immediate neighborhood stake in the crisis. Instead of doing anything unilaterally, if the Americans work closely with South Korea and Japan, there is possibility, given Russian and Chinese understanding of the compulsions to do it, there is possibility of preventing a war. That's what I feel.
All right. On that, thank you so much, Mr. KP Nair, for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Moving on now, rescue work has intensified in Texas, with officials launching search operations and saving people stuck in the receding floodwaters in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. Hurricane Harvey is one of the most destructive storms in American history that has claimed at least 47 lives till now. Nearly a week after Hurricane Harvey slammed into the Texas coast, desperate residents remain stranded without food and water in the wake of unprecedented flooding. Authorities are searching for survivors and have made helicopter rescues from rooftops. The officials are assessing the storm's trail of destruction in Houston as the floodwaters slowly started to recede in southeastern Texas. In Crosby, about 48 kilometers northeast of Houston, alarming reports emerged about the danger posed by a chemical plant after the French company operating the facility said explosions were possible. The Neches River in East Texas surged far beyond its banks into streets, houses and businesses in the city. The White House said President Donald Trump will donate $1 million of his personal money for flood relief operations in Texas and Louisiana.
I think we really have seen it. Nowhere is our unity more evident than in the actions of our volunteer and charitable organizations that rally to their neighbors' aid when disaster strikes. The people of Texas and Louisiana were hit very hard by a historic flood. In their response, they have taught us all a lesson, a very, very powerful lesson. There was no outbreak in crime. There was an outbreak of compassion only, real, beautiful, strong compassion. And they've really inspired us as a nation. To be honest, they've inspired the world because the world is watching.
Working with the Red Cross, we now have, across the state of Texas, 258 shelters that are now open. 107 of those shelters are shelters that are partnered with or in collaboration with the state in some form or fashion, and 151 are considered to be independent shelters, which would be the type of shelter that, let's say, a church would provide.
It's time for a short break. Now, still to come, Kenya Supreme Court annuls result of presidential poll, says electoral board committed irregularities and illegalities that harmed the integrity of the election. That and much more on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The sacred relics of Buddha were unearthed in Pereira in Uttar Pradesh. Buddhist monks from all over the world visit the National Museum to pay their respects. These charred bone fragments of Buddha are housed in the gold canopy gifted by the royal family of Thailand.
Welcome back. You're watching World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira. Well, the disengagement of Indian and Chinese troops in Doklam is over. This comes after nearly 3 months of a tense standoff between the two countries. Chinese troops have left the disputed area along with bulldozers and removed tents. Indian troops have also moved out of the standoff area. The breakthrough comes just a week ahead of the BRICS summit being hosted by China between September 3rd and 5th, which Prime Minister Modi will attend.
In a major diplomatic breakthrough, India and China on Monday decided to end their lengthy standoff at Doklam near the Sikkim border. The Ministry of External Affairs said both countries had maintained diplomatic communication and agreed to expeditious disengagement of border personnel at Doklam.
It is a tremendous diplomatic victory for our country that both the countries' armies have agreed to pull back. This standoff was going on since about 2 months, and despite Chinese threats through media that we should withdraw, otherwise there will be a war, we were hanging on there. It was a very good decision on the part of Modi government, and whatever we have pressurized to the entire world, we have come out victorious, and all the credit goes to the government decision to hang on there, and that's why we have got a diplomatic victory.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry told media in Beijing that China will make adjustments according to the situation in Doklam.
Indian forces and their equipment have already been withdrawn to the Indian side of the border. China's personnel on the ground have already confirmed this. China will continue to exercise sovereignty rights to protect territorial sovereignty in accordance with the rules of historical boundary. Because the ground situation has changed, China will make necessary adjustments and deployments in accordance.
Defense experts hailed it as a big diplomatic victory for India.
The disengagement protocol is adhered to in a mutually acceptable manner. It would be a very major gain for India and China, and the political leadership in both sides should be commended for the manner in which they have handled it. India has shown very, very commendable levels of restraint, firmness, and also I think a certain respect for the protocol of how to deal with a major power like China in such a situation.
Last week, Home Minister Rajnath Singh hinted at a possible amicable solution to the border standoff, indicating that India was working to resolve the issue peacefully.
डोकलाम में एक डेडलॉक भारत और चाइना के बीच चल रहा है, लेकिन मैं समझता हूं कि उसका समाधान जल्दी निकलेगा. चीन भी अपनी तरफ से सकारात्मक पहल करेगा.
The intense standoff had caught global attention as well. Both Russia and the United States had urged China to help maintain peace and engage with India through dialogue.
This message will go that both such big countries can solve their problems among themselves without involving any nation like UNO and other countries also.
The disengagement at Doklam comes just days ahead of the BRICS summit in China in the first week of September, easing tensions between both countries. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Another international news now. Thousands of fearful Rohingya Muslims and Rakhine Buddhist civilians have fled to Bangladesh in the wake of the violence that killed over 100 people in the region. The United Nations and international aid groups were forced to pull out their staff. India also raised serious concern over the violence and has extended its strong support to the Myanmar government. Myanmar's government has evacuated at least 4,000 villagers amid ongoing clashes in northwestern Rakhine state. Thousands of Rohingya Muslims fled across the border to Bangladesh, but many were told to turn back by Bangladeshi border guards.
If we go there to our land, the army will kill us. So you better kill us here or you negotiate with them so that we can go back there. I don't want to go there now. I went to the border but firing is going on. So I have come back.
Thousands of fearful Rohingya Muslims and Rakhine Buddhist civilians have fled the northern part of Rakhine state over the last few days. Meanwhile, dozens of international aid workers who were stationed in Mongdo were seen leaving for Rakhine State's capital, Sitwe, on Sunday as the situation worsened. The United Nations also pulled out non-essential staff from the area.
We have given security to aid workers, but no one can fully guarantee their safety. We'll help them according to their wishes. If they want to stay, we'll give them security at best that we can. If they don't want to stay due to their safety and want to leave, we told them that we will help them.
Pope Francis is expected to travel to Myanmar and Bangladesh later this year for a landmark visit to focus international attention on the stateless Rohingya Muslim minority. The death toll from the violence that erupted on Friday with coordinated attacks by Rohingya insurgents has climbed to 104. The vast majority are militants plus 12 members of security forces and several civilians. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television. Well, much else has unfolded around the world this week. Here's a quick roundup of the other international news in Globe Watch.
Kenya's Supreme Court has nullified the result of the August 8th presidential election won by President Uhuru Kenyatta. In a ruling issued on Friday, the court said that the Electoral Board committed irregularities and illegalities during last month's vote, harming the integrity of the election. The court ordered another presidential election to be held within 60 days. No Kenyan presidential election has ever been nullified. Lawyers for Kenyatta called the court's nullification a very political decision, but said they will live with the decision. The Trump administration has notified Congress that it has given $255 million conditional military assistance to Pakistan that the country can access only if it takes more action against terror groups. The assistance has been put in an escrow account, meaning an account of conditional deposition where the funds are kept blocked until the pre-agreed conditions are met. The announcement comes over a week after President Donald Trump hit out at Pakistan for providing safe havens to terror groups. An anti-terrorism court in Pakistan declared former military chief Pervez Musharraf a fugitive in former Pakistani Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto's assassination trial. Ordering his property to be confiscated, the court also sentenced 2 former senior policemen to 17 years each in prison and acquitted 5 others in the case. Musharraf has been in Dubai ever since his travel ban was lifted. Iraq on Thursday declared that its forces had retaken the northern city of Tal Afar and the surrounding region in another major victory over the Islamic State group. Iraq on Thursday declared that its forces had retaken the northern city of Tal Afar and the surrounding region in another major victory over the Islamic State group. Tal Afar was the last major population center in northern Iraq, still under jihadist control, and its loss deprives the IS of what was once a key supply hub between its territory in Syria and Iraq. According to the Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi, after 12 days of fighting, Tal Afar had regained its place in the national territory. J.Y. Pillai, an Indian origin veteran civil servant, was on Friday appointed Singapore's acting president until a new head of state is sworn in later this month. 83-year-old Pillai took over from Tony Tan Keng Yam, who completed a 6-year term on Thursday. Pillai, chairman of the Council of Presidential Advisors, will act as the president until after polling day on the 23rd of September or after nomination day on the 13th of September if a candidate is elected unopposed.
Well, let's now shift gears and bring you up to speed with all the sports news you might have missed in sports action. Liverpool completed the £35 million signing of England midfielder Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain from Arsenal. The 24-year-old, who rejected a move to Chelsea on Tuesday after a fee had been agreed, joined on a 5-year contract worth £120,000 a week. Oxlade-Chamberlain, who was in the last year of his Arsenal contract, rejected a new deal worth up to £180,000 a week to stay at the Emirates. He made 198 appearances for Arsenal since joining them from Southampton in August 2011, scoring 20 goals. Japan booked their place in the 2018 World Cup with an emphatic 2-0 win over Australia in Saitama on Thursday that took their Asian arch-rivals' hopes of qualifying for Russia out of their hands. Takuma Osano scored late in the first half before 21-year-old midfielder Yosuke Ideguchi finished in the 82nd minute as the Samurai Blue sealed a sixth straight appearance in the global showpiece. Japan joined Iran, Brazil and host Russia in the 32-team tournament, which will be held from June 14 to July 15th next year. Fourth seed Alexander Zverev was knocked out of the US Open in 4 sets by Croatia's Borna Coric in New York. The 20-year-old German took the first set but eventually fell to a 3-6, 7-5, 7-6, 7-6 defeat on grandstand court. He had 3 set points in the 12th game of the 4th set to take it into a decider, but Coric saved them all and sealed victory in the tie-break. Despite winning 5 titles this year, Zverev has still not progressed beyond the last 16 of a Grand Slam. Caroline Wozniacki described the decision to schedule Maria Sharapova's US Open matches on the main stadium court as questionable. Sharapova, in her first Grand Slam event since returning from a 15-month doping ban, played her first 2 matches in the Arthur Ashe Stadium. Wozniacki said that putting the Russian wildcard on the main court following her ban doesn't set a good example. The Danish 5th seed lost to Ekaterina Makarova on court 17 late on Wednesday. Former champion Manny Pacquiao has pulled out of a welterweight rematch with Australian Jeff Horn, who stunned the boxing world with victory in July. The 38-year-old Filipino fighter is said to have other commitments at the time of the rescheduled bout on the 12th of November. Horn, a 29-year-old former school teacher, was given a unanimous 12-round decision in Brisbane. The World Boxing Organization reviewed the result with a new set of judges who still favoured Horn for the win. And finally, tens of thousands of partygoers in Spain threw 160 tons of overripe tomatoes at each other in an epic food fight known as La Tomatina on Wednesday. Over 20,000 people, both from Spain and abroad, gathered for the messy battle in the small town of Buñol in eastern Spain, which takes place annually on the last Wednesday of August. Revelers from around the world crammed the narrow streets of Buñol to smear each other with squashed tomatoes. I'm going to leave you this week with these visuals from Spain. Until next time, this is Frank Pereira signing off.